Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to this episode of BiblioTech On Air. I'm Rosanna.
I'm Ruby.
And I'm Israel.
And for today's episode, we have a very special guest with us. Author of several books such as Ander and Santi Were Here, the upcoming Futbolista, and their newest release, Canto Contigo, we have Jonny Garza Villa with us. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Hi.
Yeah, happy to have you here.
For sure.
Yeah, and we for sure will have Futbolista on our resources.
We'll make sure
We're going to make it happen.
We'll make sure.
Yeah. But yeah, before we get started, we do have a set of questions. Do you mind telling us about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Jonny Garza Villa. I am an author of young adult and new adult contemporary novels. I've been writing since late 2018. I'm a Sagittarius sun, Capricorn, everything else. And born and raised Texan. Been living in San Antonio a long time now. I forget, like 15 years now, actually. Yeah, that's me.
Gotcha. And how did you get into writing?
Yeah, it was really like an on a whim thing where I was reading Becky Albertalli's Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda in preparation to go see Love, Simon. And like, I loved the book, adore Becky, really loved the movie too. And I went with like other like queer Latino friends of mine. And I remember afterwards we were talking about how just like the books about us and about, you know, the young people like us don't necessarily get that sort of like chance to get adapted and all this sort of praise and stuff. And maybe because like I wasn't super sober, I was just like, you know what, someone should write that, and why can't that be me? And it kind of just became an obsession of like never having done this before. Like someone should tell that story for us. And then I just did it.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
that
that's
is amazing.
so
You took a leap.
Yeah, definitely.
Love
Had
it.
no idea what came next, but I was like, if I just start here, then I'll figure something out along the way.
And I mean, look at you now.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah,
amazing.
especially we were
That's
riffing
great.
a little bit before we got started, and you said you had no writing experience.
Yeah, no
like,
writing
at all. So you
experience.
really just said, we're diving into this.
Absolutely was that.
Nice.
All right, so again, Canto Contigo. When a mariachi star transfers schools, he expects to be handed his new group's lead vocalist spot. What he gets instead is a tenacious current lead with a very familiar, very kissable face. In a 24-hour span, Rafael Alvarez led North Amistad High School's Mariachi Alma de la Frontera to their 11th consecutive first-place win in the Mariachi Extravaganza de Nacional, and met and made out with and almost hooked up with one of the cutest guys he's ever met. Now, 8 months later, Rafi's ready for one final win. What he didn't plan for is his family moving to San Antonio before his senior year, forcing him to leave behind his group while dealing with the loss of the most important person in his life, his beloved abuelo. Another hitch in his plan, the Selena Quintanilla Perez Academy's Mariachi Todos Colores already has a lead vocalist, Ray Chavez, the boy Rafi made out with, who now stands between him winning and being the great mariachi Rafi's abuelo always believed him to be. Despite their newfound rivalry for center stage, Rafi can't squash his feelings for Ray. Now he must decide between the people he's known his entire life or the one just starting to get to know the real him. Kanto Contigo is a love letter to Mexican culture, family, and legacy, the people who shaped us, and allowing ourselves to forge our own path. At its heart, it's one of the most glorious rivals to lovers romance about finding the one who challenges you most in extraordinary ways. It's a pretty detailed summary.
Yes.
Yeah, very
It
detailed
is.
summary. Yeah. Pretty good summary.
Pretty good summary.
Alrighty.
But with that, let's go ahead and hop right into these questions. All right, so what inspired you to write Canto Contigo, and how did your own experiences shape the story?
Yeah, so I think just generally speaking with my books, I love to write about my culture, just first and foremost. And I love being able to celebrate aspects of it while also being able to take that same thing and being able to, as well as talk about also the ways in which it doesn't necessarily live up to the expectations of inclusivity and that sort of beauty, especially as it pertains to young queer and trans people. And so mariachi was just sort of a really obvious thing of like, this is gorgeous and beautiful, and like, I love mariachi, but also it's so traditional, and with tradition, it can bring that sort of transphobia and queerphobia and anti-Blackness. And so it just seemed like a really great starting point for me to be able to write a story that was engaging for me personally, but also brought the potential for plot, which I don't like writing just naturally. And so I was like, okay, cool. I have a place where I can at least start writing some plot and some tension. And I think just wanting to like challenge myself in having never necessarily written something so tropey. I think my first two books are very much like coming of age stories, and also here's a main character who immediately is crushing on this boy, and then they kind of just start kissing. And this one is very much enemies to lovers and sort of star-crossed and all of these things. And never having written like a rivals to lovers story, but really appreciating especially the rivals to lovers stories that are coming out right now in contemporary YA, I was like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to like kind of match their energy. Really hard because like I think that sort of like immediately kissing thing is very much on me too, of just being really impatient about just like, yeah, let's just get to that part. And so like just writing Rafi's story of like having them yell at each other, him and Ray, for 200 pages was like, we'll get through this somehow. But yeah, so that's kind of like where the mariachi influence came in, and like the sort of tropish romanticism of it all. But then I realized I could tie it to my own life and my own experience in creating a grief narrative for Rafi and that coming of age experience for him. My own grandfather was a mariachi, and he also, like Rafi's grandfather, died from complications from Parkinson's. And so like I got to like write that part for him and for me, and I got to kind of like navigate that sort of grief with Rafi. And it also just gave me like a way in which to show Rafi growing, especially in like a rivals to lovers situation. I wanted to make him a butt, but I also wanted to make him someone who's redeemable. And so showing grief and hopefully readers seeing like this grief being something that is making Rafi seem so like someone push him down, please, but also like very much human in that way in which we all grieve and can act that sort of way. At least I hope makes him like a sort of redeemable character.
I liked that. I did not like Rafi in the beginning.
Good.
I was like, oh my God, why is he so like...
He was a little insufferable.
Like, but I'm so glad like he had that growth throughout the book. I mean, it's understandable. Like when I was looking into it, I was like, I can see where he's coming from, like that perspective where his grandfather was a mariachi. He has all this pressure, like within himself, you know, like I feel like coming from like immigrant parents, you always have that pressure like to be something great, because it's like they did so much for you. Like how are you not going to take that and like just expand it beyond? So I can see where he had all that pressure within himself to be something great, and like not like let himself be vulnerable and let himself love and things like that. So I liked like the depth of that character.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I really enjoyed that, you know, you went right from the beginning, this is what's happening, because a lot of the books that I've read, it's a slow start. It's such a slow start. And I can really appreciate such a fast pace, put you in there, put you in the story, what's going on. Like it really captures it. It's like, it's a hook, you know, and it really did that. And I really enjoyed that.
Great. I actually like that first chapter in itself was something that was kind of a late addition because I was trying to like really tie Rafi and Ray together, and I realized maybe giving them a sort of like backstory, even if it's minimal, like maybe that will allow me to sort of like, okay, now they're coming back together and it's going to feel really weird. And it also gave me that opportunity to like speak about his grandfather too. And so I think like that first chapter really helped me cement like, okay, this is who everyone is, and this is where we're starting at, and this is why everyone's like they are 8 months later.
And it's such a unique premise too. Like you mentioned that, you know, you already have your, you know, you grew up with mariachi culture, you know, that was something your abuelo did, and you're able to tie that into the story so well. But at the same time, like you did mention earlier, you know, kind of breaking away from that tradition in a couple ways. Because like with Rafi's family being so Latina and just, you know, they're very accepting of him and like, you know, like the people around him, like there's not really immediate homophobia that we see in his family. But on the flip side, he constantly name drops, you know, Vicente Fernandez. And, you know, it is mentioned like while he's, you know, pretty much the mariachi of mariachis, he's still like, if you know, like later in life he found out about like that homophobia that was just in him. So it's kind of cool that you were able to manage that. I feel like that's such a delicate thing to balance, but you did that very well.
Thank you. Yeah. after my first book, which had a sort of crappy familial situation, I was like, no, like these families are going to be kind of day ones for their kids.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Ride or die.
We're going to find other ways in which these parents can drag this boy, and I'm sure I can find some.
He had a few chanclas thrown at him throughout that story. So
Deservingly. Were you in mariachi growing up?
No, I wasn't, but in like my small hometown where I grew up, the public school had a mariachi, and I was going to be in it. Like there was this whole about like I was trying to get into the private school, and then my parents were like, we can't go to the private school. But by the time I figured out we couldn't go to the private school, it was too late to join the public school's marching band because they're serious about their marching band.
Oh, wow.
And so I was like, well, I guess I'll join the mariachi band instead. That's cool. And so for like the whole summer, I was like training with a mariachi instructor to like just kind of jump in right away as like, I think I was to be their singular freshman or maybe like one of two. And like the Thursday before school started, my mom was like, no, you're going to the private school actually.
Oh my God.
I got like a couple of months of mariachi training, but that's basically it.
Uno reverse.
Uno
Like,
reverse.
why?
Yeah.
So kind of shifting into the writing process, can you tell us about what that was like for you, developing characters, things like that?
Yeah, this book was very, I mean, I think all of my books have been kind of different in their own way. But like I like this, like, you know, writing this book just as a first draft, it actually took just 11 days to write a first draft.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
Were you just like in a
I know.
frenzy?
Yeah. So what helped was that I wrote it like in 2020, and I actually went with one of my friends and a fellow author, Sonora Reyes, to this like cabin in the middle of the mountain and woods in Arizona. And we were just like, we're going to write. Like, we're just going to spend a few weeks and write up there. And they're a wildly fast drafter too, and so I was like, well, I need to keep up with them. I like to just go slow, but I think what helped is that I also outlined this book for I had never outlined a book. I kind of just like to vibe, but I think because of those two things, I had written a first draft that I kind of hated for some reason, and I couldn't really figure out why, but I think a lot of it was because I outlined it and just took like so like I did not let myself stray from that outline. And I think just a part of me, especially when it comes to YA writing, I love to just sort of vibe with the character and see where they are that day and let them go where they need to be. And so it was a lot of figuring out, like, what should that look like then? And again, just writing Rafi as a redeemable character was something that I was really trying to make sure was successful. And all of that took most of the next 2 years of just figuring out like why I hated this book, and also realizing that, like, you know, if I really actually like fully hated this book, I'd give up on it. But there's something about it that I really want to tell, and that means a lot to me. So if I'm sticking with it, that means that like it's worth sticking with and finding out like why I hate it. But yeah, so I sold the book in 2022, early 2022. Had not finished writing a draft that I really loved. I kind of had like a summary down and like the first 50 pages, and I sent it to my publishing editor, and they were like, sure, yeah, we'll take it. Because I realized if I was not handed human money for this, I was not going to figure it out. Like I needed real encouragement and like a solid deadline. And so we spent the next fall of 2022 and in 2023 figuring it out. And this one was definitely my problem child for sure.
Did that so you stated that you had an outline. Did you feel that limited you in the development of the characters?
I think so, with it being my first time having outlined, and again with YA too, I think there's something about just being able to like where are they I like kind of figured out like where I land. Like I still will have like a book about like beats and craft up. That way, like if I'm writing and I get lost, I can sort of figure out where I should be in terms of just like storytelling. But I try not to like stick to a strict one if I have to. Which I feel like has differed from adult writing. With adult writing, for some reason, I'm like, I can write an outline and it works really well. So yeah, it's just kind of like learning where I land as a writer and what helps me best. But yeah, so it was really a big learning experience, and I'm glad I did it because I could at least learn like what about outlining I don't like and what about it I can take from. But it really did block me for a minute.
Gotcha. Man, that experience of going into the woods.
I know.
That sounds like a dream. Yeah. Just going in, writing. That
cool,
must have been a great experience.
It was, yeah. And I mean, at night, whenever we'd have to walk Sonora's dog, I was like, if we hear something, I'm leaving.
I know.
Like, this is
naturally.
Yeah. I'm
enough.
leaving you. And it had started snowing once, and I was like freaking out because obviously like we don't get much snow here. And I was like, how are we going to get anything? And Sonora was like, we'll just go drive. Like, I don't know.
Excuse me? In the snow?
Yeah, I didn't know what we were doing up there, but it was really fun and therapeutic, and
Yeah, and this was during the time, like peak COVID?
Yeah, it
and
was.
so y'all were able to like really take advantage of an unfortunate situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Yeah, definitely. So shifting over to like the emotional side, there's a lot of heavy emotions in this book, right? So how did you approach the writing the emotional scenes in the book? What was your approach like?
I've learned to take it slowly, as slow as I can.
Yeah.
Nowadays I don't really get too much time, but I try to take it like in steps. Like in a first draft, I know I don't need to bring the emotions 100%. If I sort of establish a foundation of like what the characters should be feeling, maybe a couple of descriptors, then I can go back and like really figure out exactly what he's feeling in that moment or what they're feeling in that moment. And also just keeping track with myself, especially if it comes to something sort of personal, like realizing like how much I can give to a particular scene at one time. A lot of times I'll like gift myself like a really light or funny scene right afterwards, just to kind of like transition from that and that thinking. But yeah, I think that it's really just step-by-step process as much as I can make it, and a lot of like hopefully having other people being able to read it and like letting them say like, yeah, you could bring a little bit more here, like in terms of like any sort of specificities of like if it's a familial sort of relationship or if someone should be really mad here. Having other people really tell me like if it hits or not is really helpful.
And do you find it difficult to like accept their suggestions? I feel like for me personally, if someone would be like, nah, that's not good, it would be kind of hard for me.
Yeah, what I have learned, like having editors and agents and all these things who give suggestions, is that if I don't agree with them, I try to figure out what exactly they didn't like about it and how maybe I can change it in a way that makes it more clear as to why I was right.
Gotcha. I like that.
Yeah, because it's like if I know that like I'm on the right track and they want me to change it, it's because they can't see the track I'm on. And so I just need to make that more clear.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And were there any like specific moments that were particularly difficult or cathartic to write in this book?
Oh my God. I think that scene where like they're like going into like Dia de Muertos, and Rafi's sort of like having a hard time with that. That one for sure. The very like, not the very final scene, but the scene, like the penultimate scene where he's like at his grandfather's grave again. That one I think like kind of hit me in a way that most things I write like haven't. Just being able to write that one probably.
Yeah, it was at a heavy moment. It was definitely a heavy moment. Understandable.
That moment was pretty interesting because at that moment where he shows like his grandpa's grave, you know, the trophy and all of that. And then we see like his grandpa come to him again, while throughout the book, like he had the calavera in his room, and it was like kind of his grandpa manifesting, you know, through his grief, like kind of his conscious in a way. Yeah. So it's kind of cool. We went from like having the calavera to like the actual,
definitely.
You know,
human being.
Yeah, well,
a ghost apparition.
But yeah, apparition. Thank you. So that was just kind of a nice little moment.
Yeah, and even the sort of magical realism of it all with that calavera was a very late addition too. I had already like written a full manuscript and sent it to my editor, and she came back to me with like I would love like a sort of real physical representation of Rafi grieving, because like I can tell he's sad, I can tell he misses his grandfather, but like I really want something more. And I kind of just thought about it. I really love things like On My Block where like Jamal's talking to like the gnomes, and in Lincoln's Camp's Heartbreak Symphony, there's a character who sort of has this like dead mouse-ish sort of character kind of living in his head. And so I was like, what if I can find a middle ground for that? And it kind of came as this mariachi calavera that may or may not be talking to Rafi. And I didn't tell my editor what I was doing. I just was like, I'm going to go with it, and then I'll send it back. And if she hates it, she hates it. Thankfully, she liked it. And so I was like, cool, yeah, let's do this. Let's put some magical realism in this book.
No, yeah, I like that. I mean, I feel like as a human, I talk to myself all the time. And sometimes I talk to other people. I've had conversations with other people that they never knew about it. But like that happens.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
like, but to associate that with an actual physical thing, because you were able to even bring in that really emotional scene where he breaks the calavera. So I was like, oh my God, that's it. He's gone forever officially. But then at the end, you're like, no, he goes back to the grave and the apparition comes. So it's like, he's always there. Like,
exactly.
You did that really horrible thing, but it's okay.
Yeah, it reminds me of that I don't know what Shakespeare book it is, but is it a ghost or is it not a ghost? You know? I like that classic writing.
Classic writing.
I think it was Hamlet where he keeps seeing
so.
his dad, and people are like, "Nah, you're
Hamlet.
just tripping,
I
man."
think it was.
Yeah, and so there's that whole debate whether did he see a ghost
Or is he just insane?
Is he just insane?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah.
And I mean, I've had those questions of like, is it actually talking to him? And I was like, it's whatever you want it to be. Like, it can be yes or no.
Yeah, definitely.
It's kind of funny because we just did an episode for Pan's Labyrinth, and we
Oh
had
my
that debate
God.
where it's like, okay, did she actually like experience that,
Yeah.
or was it just in her head?
Yeah. No, I feel the same way about we were just watching Over the Garden Wall.
Love Over the Garden Wall.
love
It's Over the Garden Wall season.
It is. It definitely is.
Yeah.
It's all over TikTok for me.
Oh, it's so good. It's only 10 episodes. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. It's so good.
We'll get into
I think it actually happened to him, though.
I think so, too,
Wirt like had that adventure with his little brother.
Yeah, I think so too.
So going back when we mentioned that Rafi has this growth throughout the book, which thank you. So what message do you hope readers take away about self-acceptance and personal growth?
Yeah, I think it really is just like we're all human. We all go through sort of universal things like grief and loss. And the way in which we react doesn't make us any less worthy of love or compassion or community. But also like seek those out and like, try to figure out how to process. And like process can be hard, especially when you're young and when you're dealing with it for the first time. But movement is movement, I think. And
Definitely.
yeah, and that like it really, I think like especially when it comes to like Latina and Mexican cultures, like these people never necessarily leave us if we don't want them to. And so, it's really holding on to our own sort of tradition and culture and the fact that they can be around if we want them to.
Yeah, definitely.
I forgot. I liked too when there was that scene in the book where his family comes back or comes to San Antonio's visiting and is like, "This isn't the Rafi that we know," like things like that. So I'm like, wow, that's crazy. Like I feel like he's like growing for the better, but then sometimes people are like, "But that's not you,"
Yeah.
But then it's like, what is truly the you?
Right. Yeah. And I think especially at 17, 18, like the you that you are is constantly changing and evolving. And I think that, especially when it comes to like lifelong friends, they can have both our side and be very much with us, but also like have seen us in ways that other people haven't and sort of have that idea of who we are that feels so cemented versus someone who may have met you a few months ago, which is something that I love writing about, like with best friends. And then you have a romantic interest that just comes into your life. And for some, because of that becomes that person that you seek out now instead of your best friend. And how does that play out with interpersonal relationships and all these things? So I really loved writing that. It's in particular of his friends coming and being like, who is this person?
Yeah.
And everyone who he has met would be like, no, like this is actually a great person.
Yeah.
Kind of. He's getting there. Maybe not great, but he's getting there.
They're like, did you meet him before?
Yeah.
He was horrible to be around. You liked that?
But I like that, and it's almost a little bit intense because we personally, and I'm sure a lot of us have gone through something like that where we meet individuals, like even just here working for BiblioTech, when I first started working with BiblioTech 6 years ago, I am not the same individual at all, right? And so I just wonder, I wonder how I present myself to the director, to my parents, to my family, to my coworkers as well. It was a little intense, and I really appreciated that. It was very real.
Good.
What reactions have you received from readers, particularly from LGBTQ plus and Latinx communities? Were there any responses that surprised you?
Anytime someone says they loved Rafi, that kind of surprises me.
You're like,
Well,
like you must have been wild as a teenager for sure. But I think that like it's been really great, especially to meet like trans femme girls and like people with that experience who like see themselves, especially in like Chope, and have like this trans representation of this like girl out here doing her thing. Seeing those kind of those girls like really see themselves in Chope has been really incredible. And even like Afro Latinas seeing themselves in Ray, to be able to have given them something like that is really cool too. And yeah, I think just like really showing them like that, we can navigate any sort of thing that we love, and like we belong there. I was actually able to also like meet the founder of the mariachi Arco Iris in Los Angeles that's mentioned in the book. As like the singular like all queer mariachi. Whenever they were founded, they were, I think he says there may be more now, but like they're just completely queer focused, and at the time too, as was noted in the book, like they had the singular trans femme lead vocalist in the world, and like what that symbolizes as far as like really cool but also really lonely, and like really sharing like how we kind of all live in a bubble of sorts, and them and Todos Colores being like this safe space, but then you have outside and it's real world, it's still going to be Texas, and it's still going to be Earth, and so that and like being able to like meet people and just be in community with them in that way has been really cool.
That was so beautifully done. Like the book is incredibly diverse, and it's not like in a pandering way. Like you really take your time to develop each character, and we see kind of the struggles, like with Ray and his, not only it feels like him being trans isn't like, obviously that's not his whole personality. I feel more of a struggle for him that we kind of hear about is the kind of inter-Latina racism that he deals with, especially being a mariachi.
Yeah.
And then, of course, with Shop. Oh my God, she was amazing. She was such a wonderful character. Loved her.
Holds the singular brain cell of that entire group.
honestly, if it weren't for her, oh my goodness, these, they would not have gone far. No. But yeah, and then of course her brother, Xolo, who was kind of like the bad boy, but with like a heart of gold.
No, yeah.
Like,
my favorite character, 100% my favorite character.
It was so cool. It was just such a wonderful, diverse cast. And the fact that we got a little bit of their personalities throughout the book instead of just like having them as side characters. It's so important because, like mentioned earlier, things like these, there's not a whole lot of representation, whether for Latina or queer people of color. So it was just so wonderful that you did an amazing job on that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So that does round up our questions, but we do know that you're working on a book. Did you want to say when that's coming out?
Sure. Yeah, my next book is going to be my new adult debut. It's called Futbolista. It comes out March 11th. Next year, and it's technically a spin-off of my debut novel 1500 Miles from the Sun.
I like that.
Yeah, it follows a side character from there, one of our main character Jules's friends and soccer teammates, who's now, his name is Gabriel Piñan, who's now a college freshman at A&M Corpus Christi. Like they're starting goalkeeper on their, we call it football in the book, their football team, and sort of like navigating these expectations of like people seeing his greatness and sort of like his dreams of being in the MLS or like La Liga Mexico, and like, like they're right there now. And sort of wanting to maintain that sort of narrow path that leads him there, while also, because of a boy he kisses at a party and turns out to be like his philosophy classmate who he hates philosophy, so like this boy is like, well, I'll help tutor you, and like they become friends because of the tutoring, and he's like realizing maybe I'm not as straight as I thought I was, and coming to terms with his bisexuality and really loving his bisexuality, while also realizing that football can be a really queer-phobic sort of culture when it comes to like the Mexican community, and kind of like the question of like who does he think he's allowed to be versus who he might be brave enough to be.
I see.
Yeah.
Very nice. Very exciting.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to reading that, definitely. Yeah.
So to end this podcast episode, as we are a library, we want to know, what are you reading?
Oh, so I'm reading an advanced copy right now of And They Were Roommates by Paige Powers.
And they were roommates.
It's like a YA boarding school book. Really silly, but also, it's really fun to read. Right after, I do have it also an arc of Sonora Reyes' The Proposal, so I'm going to read that. And Julian Winters' new book, The Prince of the Palisades, is on my TBR too. So those are kind of like what I'm reading. I just finished The Sons of El Rey by Alex Espinosa. It's like an intergenerational story of like also a grandfather dying. And he was like in Lucha Libre in Mexico City and like kind of started that whole thing and then moved to Los Angeles. And his son, who's now like an adult working at the gym that his father opened. And then his grandson, who's like queer and sort of navigating post-pandemic LA and trying to find his footing as a creative writing professor. And sort of like getting all of this drama, familial stuff. It was so dramatic. Oh my gosh. But yeah, that was a really incredible book.
Great. Nice.
Jonny, great writer, avid reader.
Yeah. Yeah, for real. All right. That's a nice little slate right there. But that's going to wrap it up for us, Jonny. Thank you so much for being on here. And if our listeners want to know more about you, where can they look you up? Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Jonny Instas. And sort of on TikTok at Jonny Escribe, and kind of on Twitter too at Jonny Escribe. And then my website's JonnyGarzaVilla.com. Very nice. Cool beans. Make sure y'all check that out. And again, Kanto Contigo on Cloud Library, as well as the rest of their collection. So be sure to check those out. And Futbolista coming out next year in March. Very good. All right. Thank you again. That wraps it up for us. So thank you guys for listening. I'm Rosanna. I'm Ruby. And I'm Israel. We'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.